Hey guys, Fox here, and today it's time for the last game picks video of the 2025 UFL season. Yeah, I know it sucks. We officially are down to one game before the season is over. Now, the season overall was definitely a wild one from the really awful start of the season with a lot of bad games to that mid-season where week after week we had 3 to 4 just banger games every week. It's wild. And we're going to get a new champion because it is the DC Defenders versus the Michigan Panthers. Yes, for the first time, obviously, since the Renegades in 2023 winning the XFL, we have a new champion. So, if you count the USFL and XFL, which obviously the UFL does, this is the third ever champion. It is either going to be the Michigan Panthers or DC Defenders. And it also means that for the first time in this era of spring football, when the Stallions are not, or when in the league, are not going to be champions. So, massive W there for the league. Now, as for the matchup between DC and Michigan, I will be streaming this game. I'll be starting my stream at 7:45 EST, so make sure you're here for that one, unless you're going to be obviously watching the game normally. The overall spread total money line might have changed since I got this stuff, but the spread was +3 for DC, 50.5 over-under, and -162 for the Panthers, and +136 for the Defenders. Why is the over-under so big? Let's just get over that, because that's a big question. We have not seen the over-under be that huge. Well, both these teams combined for almost 80 points last week, just the two of them, right? They both put up a ton of points, whereas DC just dominated St. Louis. Michigan was just in a high-scoring game against Birmingham. So, that's a big reason for it. Now, as for who wins, this is a tough one. Because in a lot of ways, you could easily see either team get the W. Because the real question, Michigan, we know what they are. DC is Pandora's box. Their biggest weaknesses heading into the playoffs were their terrible defense and their terrible ground game. And their biggest advantage was their incredible passing game. Their passing game was actually kind of pedestrian last week. But their ground game and their defense looked really good. Now, how much of that is St. Louis's offense under Max Duggan being that terrible? Because when Silvers came in, we saw a different St. Louis offense. It is not guaranteed because the bottom line is DC scored too many points. But if St. Louis plays Silvers the whole game, that's a tight game. DC may have lost. I don't think they would have because, again, DC's offense just dominated, and that's not on Duggan. That's on the defense. So how good is that offensive ground attack really? That's the big question. Because Michigan, we know what they are. They proved that they are who we thought they were in the Birmingham game, right? They're a team that has a great ground game. They're a team that has great receivers, right? We saw them be, every week this year, you basically have either Turner or Mariner is going to give you some really solid stat line. Then you have two solid tight ends. Again, both Cole and Gunner are both really solid. Even though Gunner was all UFL, the bottom line is they're not Jay Sternberger. They're not 2023 Sage Surratt, right? They're not Cody Latimer. They're not going to get you 150 yards. But they're guys who can give you 4 receptions for 40 yards and have all 4 receptions be first down catches on third down. So this is a tough one to call. Because what it really comes down to is, will DC's ground game be as good as they were? The bottom line is their defense. I know it's not going to be as dominant as it was, but the ground game. If it's able to do what they did against St. Louis, DC has a really good shot at winning this game. Of course, because the other thing that not many people are factoring in, this team has been to a championship before. Yes, it was in the XFLs in 2023 when people would claim that the XFL and USFL, that talent-wise, was the two weakest leagues because you had 2 leagues. I think that we've kind of seen since then that's not fully true, saying that the Birmingham continue to dominate and teams that we thought would have good defense continue to. Bottom line is, DC made it to a championship game. Yes, not everybody from that team is still here, but Abram Smith is still here. Jordan Teamu is still here. You still have guys in the coaching staff that were there. So you have a team that has that experience. Now, on the other hand, you have a team like Michigan. They've been wanting to win the championship. They had to get past Birmingham. And when you look at their team, they have a quarterback in Bryce Perkins, who was a Super Bowl champion. And yes, obviously he wasn't the starter, we all know that. But it is something to note that is, again, a little X factor. When you look at these two teams, who is the better quarterback? It's Bryce Perkins. Now, is Bryce Perkins going to be healthy? Because if it is an injured Bryce Perkins, then the answer is Teamu. I know Perkins played the whole game last week, but he didn't look fully 100%. I know he's been on the injury report, but odds are the better quarterback is Bryce Perkins. Now, the best running back is Toa Tawa. And the second best running back is arguably Matt Colburn. Now, that's where it becomes arguable because Deion Jackson has been solid, but again, it's a matter of the fact that Colburn is just such a dynamic receiving threat. Now, receiver-wise, it's not as one-sided. I know a lot of people probably say that's Josie Mariner, but Powell's been really solid, even though he's had a couple of drops here and there. It's not like Mariner's been the same as he was last year, so it's a tough call for the top receiver in this game. Tight end wise, you'd probably go with Michigan. Offensive line, you'd have to go with DC. DC's offensive line has just been really solid. The issue with the ground game has never really been the O-line's fault as much as it's just been the running back's fault. Yes, I know there's been plays where the game isn't great. I know that, pass blocking, run blocking aren't the same thing. The fact is, Te'amu's barely been touched at quarterback because of the O-line. Defense. This is the big question mark. Another one. Now, if both are healthy, Michigan's defense is clearly better. But notice I said if healthy, because Michigan's defense is not healthy. Yes, they got Javin White back, but Gidna obviously not going to be here. He was on IR. Now, their cornerback room, their DB room, Adonis Alexander, Kenny H. Lovely, a couple other guys. We don't know exactly what the game time decision is going to be for him. If you're going against DC, look, it's what I said earlier. Houston, if this was Houston versus DC, Houston is guaranteed to win the championship. Because Houston's team was built to beat DC, because they were built with a great defensive back core, and that's the one thing DC can't go against. It was proven. And guess what the injuries are for Michigan? The DBs. That's not good. So yes, even though Te'amu wasn't his normal, pass happy, gonna throw for 400-yard type of self, you still know he can do it. And you're a team that doesn't have a great DB room because of health. So it's a tough call. At the end of the day, I think that it is going to be a closer game than last year's championship game. But I think it is going to be a lower scoring game. I have Michigan winning 23-21. I do not see these two teams putting up 30-plus points each. When I see a 50 over-under, I'm not seeing a 30-20. I'm seeing like a 35-32 type of game. I don't see that. These two teams played each other. It was a very high-scoring game for Michigan. They put up like 44 points, and they beat DC by 23. I don't think that's happening. Yes, I know a lot of Michigan fans are very happy when they were matched up against DC because they're like, oh, well, we dominated them in the regular season. We're going to crush them again. I don't necessarily see it that way. Because, again, DC, what they did against St. Louis was something that we haven't seen that team do all season. Have a good ground game and a good defense. Now, the defense, I think, definitely played over their heads because they were playing against such a poor quarterback. But the running game, that was against a good defense. A great defense. Some might say the best. And so when you're able to do that, that's scary. But I think at the end of the day, the front seven-wise, Michigan's not necessarily better, but with Gidna, they're about the same. Without him, they're a bit worse, but I think that the fact they have better pressure in certain aspects, which even that's tough because they had Peta, who's DPOY. Bottom line is front seven versus front seven. Michigan's going to be able to do some damage. Now, the back end is where it's going to be a matter of how healthy and how solid can they play. You're going to have a lot of backups playing really well. So then why do I think it's still going to be a low-scoring game? I think it's because these two teams have played each other once this season. I think that DC is going to know better how to stop this ground game with Toa and Bryce. I think that the injuries to Bryce, they might try to go after his ankle a bit, try to, make him not be able to run as much. And even though he's still a much better passer than a lot of other dual threat quarterbacks in the league, he's still obviously not, prime Luis Perez, like, 2024 Perez or something like that. I think Michigan wins a low-scoring game. I think it's going to be very shocking, but it's going to be a low-scoring game. I think that the game being in St. Louis with crowd that more or less are going to hate both teams for whoever shows up. But I think that Michigan just wins a close game. Like I said, DC winning this, it's going to be because of their ground game. I think that their ground game is going to have another solid performance, and that's what they are going to be banking on, as well as beating up the DBs. Basically, the way I view it is, in a high-scoring game, DC has a really good chance to win. It's like I said with the St. Louis-Michigan game. Now, the difference is the St. Louis-DC game, I said that 25 points is the magic number. This game, I'd say it's probably closer to 35. I'd say like that 34, that mid-30s. If DC hits that, they're going to win. Now, the reason I pick Michigan is because of the fact that I do think it's going to take them to scoring that many points to win DC. But in a lower-scoring game, I think Michigan's just a better team. In a lower-scoring game, they've had experience. Look at the Arlington game. They were able to win on a last-second drive, and I think that that's a big deal. DC, when they've won close games, it's usually high-scoring games. Look at DC versus San Antonio the first time. They had a chance to win the game and couldn't get it done. That kind of scenario, Michigan pulled off. And I know DC ended up beating Arlington in a similar scenario, but it doesn't necessarily count because they got gifted a second chance because of the offense failing for Arlington, blah, blah, blah. Final prediction, Michigan wins their first championship in the UFL 23-21 in a very close game. Now, overall record, obviously we're going to be, this is going to be added on to next season, whatever. Overall, guaranteed to be at least neutral in the over-under. So we'll take that. Not as good as last year, but it is what it is. Now, money line, not as good as last year, but again, 24-18, we'll take that. Spread, much better than last year. Last year, we were fully negative, or we were like basically neutral, something like that. We were negative. This time, we were positive by at least 4, maybe even 6, so really solid. Now, perfect game betting predictions. We already were better than last year, hit 8 and we had 7. We hit 9 because I got 3 for 3 in the in the Birmingham, Michigan game, because I did correctly predict that Michigan win in that one, that upset. So we got 9 perfect ones. We went 0-3 in the St. Louis, DC game. So, is what it is. Overall record, though, solid. I'd say it's probably, well, it's technically not better than last year in a pure win-loss. Overall, it was definitely better than last year. Got 1 more perfect team score prediction. Got 2 more perfect game predictions, as well as being able to be at least neutral or positive in every single one of the 3 fronts versus last year where we were really solid in 2 of them, really bad in 1 of them. So we'll take that. Overall, this has been ZomFox. Make sure you subscribe to the bell button if you don't any videos. This upcoming week, maybe the week after, I'll have my Friday Night Football tier list video coming out. Just had my Memphis-Houston video. The award video should come out later today or tomorrow. It depends if I'm going to wait for Sportsman of the Year and all that. So it might be a double upload today. Again, stream tomorrow. Going to do power rankings next week, last power rankings of the season. Be looking for that. And as always, guys, have a great night.